folks, it is me, Damon, and I finally just found a way to get my doors into this video, more or less, I think, from corner to corner. Here's one corner. Let's see. Yep, there's the other corner, and the bottom. This is actually black floor, so that is actually the bottom. Where do I start? This is the first video fully going into my portal project. I've mentioned it briefly on my morning matcha and other posts, but this is kind of my more official one. I'm kind of a little further ahead. I've gone through all my peeling paint off and preparation, and I've gone through all my troubleshooting with drawings, and most of you guys would remember this drawing. You can find that if you go back on my artist pages. It's not the best angle, but that's my initial drawing over a photo of the doors. Why did I do this or dream up this project? I've always found the idea of the portal, the magic portal, the symbolism, metaphor, just the whole idea is something very inviting. I've always found doors, ornate doors especially, that whole concept. I've always loved buildings to be more than just a functional building, especially doors in the doorway, and the effect they have on you as you go through them can be quite profound. I also love bridges and their symbolism. There's a lot that I get attracted to, and it's usually because there's a depth of layers of meaning and effects that it has on you. And then with this piece, combining that idea of the portal, which in this case has come from church doors, or is going to be laid into church doors that I have kept for 20 years from one house to the next in the basement, with in mind that I would do something on them one day, and now I'm finally here and doing it, and it happens to be in the middle of lockdown, which didn't make me choose to do it. I had already planned it all out. I'd been talking to some people about it and planning it out that way. But lockdown just happened to come about just before I started working the doors, while I was in the middle of the polar bear project, polar bear medicine. Also for healing, as are my tattoos, and it's basically my whole pursuit and focus is how art can transform the person doing it, and how art can transform the person observing it, or in some way taking part in the art. I find that absolutely fascinating, and of course, I explored most of these possibilities with my tattooing, and now I've chosen to really branch out. I started more officially, I would say, last October 2019 on Halloween, or just before Halloween, preparing for that. I started with this pumpkin carving project that some of you might remember. I researched all the history of the jack-o'-lantern, and I felt even the history of Halloween. I had a lot of layers of distortion and overlays on top of it, and it intrigued me a lot, and I knew that there was more behind it than just trick or treat. That's what kind of got that going, and my interest was the pumpkin carving and the jack-o'-lantern, and I was suspicious that there was possibly a more healing aspect to it and a transformative aspect to it, or it wouldn't have traveled with us and mutated throughout centuries. And adapted and survived this long in different forms. So I dug into that and found some really interesting information, and I will repost some stuff, because I noticed, also looking back on my posts on Instagram and Facebook on this jack-o'-lantern pumpkin project, was that I, back then especially still, I was a little bit timid about going into why I was doing it. I kind of just gingerly touched on that. And now I've had enough of that. I don't know if it's been this whole lockdown that's done it. I think for a lot of people, there's clearly a lot of negative aspects to the lockdown, and people can get quite frustrated, and there's been a lot of mayhem all over the world and riots. But there's also, you cannot always ignore that there is always something good that comes from everything. And some of the things that I've noticed, well, some free time, depending on how you use it, that's one good thing. The aspect of it being a global experience, everyone to some degree is going through something similar. There's a value to that, because if you can tip the scale, you can have a healing experience or a transformative experience on a global level rather than something happening on like in a town or something. So that's a couple of the positive aspects of this that I was paying attention to while working on the polar bear skull for the bear medicine. I ran out of some materials because of the lockdown that were coming from India. I'd ordered some semi-precious stones and crystals that I need to take it to the next step, and also some gold to inlay into the skull. So that's on hold at the moment, and it was the perfect time to jump into my door, which has been waiting, or my doors, which have been waiting for a little over 20 years to be done. I've been carrying them with me since Toronto. I bought them at the door store that used to be there downtown, I think Adelaide or something. So I'm now brought you up to where I'm at right now with the doors themselves. And how did that develop in my head? Well, I've always found the portal idea to draw me in, and I've always wanted to not just theorize the value of the effect of someone else's doors that I walk through and how it maybe was intended, or well, I just wanted to do my own project and actually be able to have that artistic control over, like to be able to go inside myself and just lose myself in the process and the discovery of this exploration with the portal and the effects it could have, both on the process while I'm working on it and also the experience when done, when these are set up where I can, and anyone can walk through them to feel the experience when everything has been done and developed, and with such levels of symbolism put into it, and all the intention and the energy of me as the artist, and the intention and energy of anyone following along and observing and lending their energy, that's also very, very valuable. Now I'm at the stage where I have developed my imagery. I have chosen the Norse mythology, the idea of the world tree, which I'm very, very drawn to. I like the idea that it's also got so many parallels with other belief systems. I don't know where, and I don't think too many people do know if there is a place where it started, the idea of the tree of life, but it's definitely one of the biggies. And it's interesting how this whole Norse mythology has influenced and been borrowed by many other cultures, and also by Walt Disney and many other movie companies, animation companies, and others. Tolkien definitely pretty well took all the gods and characters from this Norse mythology and developed his book. And I would say for sure that Game of Thrones was heavily influenced as well. So many are. So it's quite an influential mythology. And there's a lot of, if you really read through it, there's a lot of symbolism that's quite profound. And that's when you know, or at least when I can identify a good myth, a good form of mythology is when it speaks to you, even when it's from a different culture and a different time period. You know, you just read through it and you just see parallels. And just while I was reading through and jotting down a bit of information just to read to you about this tree, this world tree, I was noticing crazy parallels. Like even with the news, just the other day and for the last while, all the fires that have been lit, a lot of buildings and stuff in the States and other places with the riots. And as I'm reading this morning about some of the symbolism, well, you know what? I'm not going to go into that until I read it, and then you'll see. The parallels are crazy. So I feel that when something speaks to me, it's a message, or it's one message, that I'm on the right track, I'm following the right thing. And also another way of knowing is if things fall into place on a ridiculously crazy level, where it's just not synchronicity anymore, it's beyond that, and happening one thing after another, just fitting into place. So I've gotten to this point. I have managed to piece together the symbols that I want to include from the tree, and I'm going to go through a little teeny bit of what I have chosen to include and not include, and then also just commenting on it as I go, what things might mean to me specifically. And things will speak to you in a different way, and some things will overlap. And that's what's the beauty of individuality. Now, the world tree is Yggdrasil, and it has 9 worlds within the branches and the roots. And this is quite a profound tree. It feels, it has emotions. It's quite the being. Like all mythology, characters in it kind of morph, and things that happen could not happen in real life. Like a giant can be killed, and planets or worlds are created from his body, and his eyelashes become this, and that becomes that. And this is familiar in many types of mythology. To me, it's like, in a lot of ways, it's more real than this world. In another way, it's not meant to be physically real, but it's so profound, I find. It's kind of like a world that's kind of between the worlds and influencing both, is how I find it. And I'll show you kind of a little bit of what I mean. So within this world tree, I wish I had, I'll have to post it so you can look at that, refer to it while you're watching this, or before or after. There are 9 worlds in this tree, and some of them rest at different levels of the tree, some in the roots, many in the roots. But just to go through, I've chosen to kind of squeeze in also Odin's wolves, his 2 wolves, and Odin's 2 ravens. But besides that, in the tree, there's a squirrel here, which I'll give you all the names in a minute in the meanings. There's a little squirrel. And if you know squirrels, you'll definitely see how they chose that squirrel for the meaning that it has. I've chosen a Triskelion to go into the sun. There are 11 apples, golden apples, and I have a little bit of information on that. It's all short. There's a serpent dragon that is gnawing on a root of the tree, of the world tree. And according to mythology, the tree feels this. And also each symbol and character usually have multiple meanings as well, which is good to pay attention to. I have an eagle somehow to squeeze in here too, which is at the top in the leaves. And it's kind of interesting because these 2 characters, the serpent dragon and the eagle that isn't in there yet. So the serpent dragon that is chewing on the root, the eagle, which is actually, they say, munching on the leaves. These 2 characters do not get along very well. And then this little guy comes into place because he's a shit disturber on some levels. And he goes back and forth and passes messages on from the dragon to the eagle, from the eagle to the dragon, and distorts things and causes more havoc. He also passes messages between the gods. When he passes the messages on to the gods, between the gods, he doesn't mess things up. But between these 2 guys, for some reason he really likes to wreak havoc. So having described, oh, and there's also right down, out the way, right down here, there is in the roots, there's a well, and that's got some profound symbolism as well. And why did I choose this mythological story and the symbolism for the portal? I think you'll just know as I go through this. It's just such a profound set of symbols that I just felt they just fit so well. The idea that I want to create this passage or this opening of this portal, the portal being what we are hovering on at the moment. And I find this always happens, the dynamics in reality where things on such a global level, that it's such a mess on one level, and the frustration and the havoc and the violence and the fear and everything in a nutshell, noticing it but not getting caught up in it for the moment, just as an example. I think we all kind of feel like it can, if we stay out of the nitty-gritty part of it, energetically, it kind of feels like it could tip this way or could tip that way. And I feel as the tension builds, it's almost like on a teeter-totter. And I feel that the more intense this tension builds, the closer we are to that point where it could tip one way or the other. And I hope, I intend, and I truly believe that we all want, no matter who we are, and I'm sure there are those inherently evil people. Leaving that out of the equation. Generally, most people, they'll come across as nasty because they're afraid, they're angry, something. It's not a normal environment we're in, and the worst characteristics come out in those periods of time. And that doesn't mean that they're not right at that point of kind of energetically popping and moving through that. And maybe this is part of how we are going to be reborn or grow through this, is that we get pushed to such a point that a lot of our bad qualities come to the surface to be let go of. But as this is happening, sometimes they get splattered on each other, and we get into little tensions and stuff. I mean, I can feel it within myself, and I'd like to believe I'm a relatively calm person, and I'm very lucky because I'm out in the wilderness, so I don't have quite the same tensions that some people in the city might have. But I get my days where all this stuff is just almost a little too much to take in, and that's when I have to get out of my mind, out of my head, and meditate or work on my transformational art piece. So I'm really hoping that this portal is something to be able to just tip that tipping point energetically with because I don't think at this point physicality can do that. It definitely has a place, and demonstrations are very important, and voicing things is very important, and everything that's going on is important. But the amount of conflict that's going on is also something that tends to come up in the physical realms, and tends to be a real block or blockage. And hence why I feel the focus on this portal project is so important for me, and I hope other people will feel the same. Because it gives you something, number one, where we can find our commonality. And the commonality is that we all want the best to come out of this. And I think it's just that everyone has different ideas on how that's to come about, and that's where conflict happens. And then you can also agree on it or not. There are also those that benefit from conflict in general, whether it's a war or what it is. There's many big companies throughout history that have put money into both sides of a war because they gain by the war continuing. And I think all of us know about those examples. And I think it's the same here. It's no different. There are those that it's in their best interest to prod these things on. Even if you could use a great example is media. Media only sells tragedies. And so they're not going to look for always, once in a while, but they're not going to look for the little cute puppy. They're going to look for something that grabs people, like the ambulance kind of thing when you're driving on the 401 and you just can't help but look and almost hit another car. I guess it's a human trait to some degree. We get drawn into these things. So media knows that they are not going to sell boring shit. Media is going to amp things up, and they're going to stir people up, and then you get others that support things, and on and on and on. I don't need to get into that, because by describing too much, I'm also going to create a situation where someone's going to agree with me and someone's going to disagree with me, which is what I don't want. I want to find the commonalities, and that's what this is all about. Once again, the portal and the symbolism and even the motion eventually of, besides the process of developing it and carving it, but once done, it doesn't stop there. It's the experience of pushing open and walking through those doors with your conscious awareness open to what you're doing. This can have extremely profound effects. There's millions of examples of this type of thing, not specifically of doors, but things like this all over the world, where you'll get pilgrimages of people for centuries that will go to that statue that bleeds, or that altar or something, and there's a lot of stories about people who go with crutches, and the crutches are left behind because they didn't have to use them on the way home, and blah blah blah. We all know all these stories. So I'm hoping this will become maybe something kind of similar to that, and it's no chance that both I was preparing to do this before anyone, or at least we knew about COVID-19 and the lockdown, and that I'm kind of have almost nothing else to do but work on the doors, which is a great opportunity as well. So that's my sentiment, and my wish and my prayer is that we all move through our differences and we come to a new level of understanding of ourselves and each other, and how we can work together on this planet, and also how we can identify the little things that are in the way that aren't necessarily us. Because I really do believe in the human spirit, and generally I feel that most human beings, although they have their little arguments and skiffs and things, I don't believe that things can get this bad without some kind of manipulation. And a good, I guess, metaphor and example would be a beehive. If someone's kind of gone, and some kid has gone and messed around with a stick in a beehive and got them all upset, well, of course, if you go and walk past that beehive, you're going to get stung. There are those agitators who purposely, sometimes aimlessly and sometimes with a very specific purpose, will agitate situations like this. So I don't believe things could get this bad without agitation working on it from all angles, all sides. I'm not blaming anyone. And then, of course, out of that, horrible things happen, which then just amp up the tensions and build the different sides and oppositions, and it's just horrible. It's not good at all. And I'm sure you all agree with me. It's just yuck. So this is my whole intention for this portal project, and I can't say it enough and emphasize enough, because I just want it to be clear. I don't want to be misunderstood with why I'm doing this. It's not just a little surfacey thing and kind of cute and cool and, oh, wouldn't this be neat, or a way to distract myself from the reality of what's going on. I fully understand what is going on in the world. I'm not hiding from it, but there are times when, you voice your political opinions and your beliefs, and at least put things up on Facebook for others to decide if they resonate or not. But there's also times where it's important to just let go of all of that and just connect with your heart and go into a different level of energy work that transcends physicality and protests and things like that. And this is, for me, where I go and what I can do and where I feel like I can make a difference. So hopefully this will help nudge us over that precipice. That this precipice, I feel like we are so, like, the tension is building so much at this point, and I really do feel that it's like a bubble that's going to burst. or the water is going to break. It's like that horrible feeling, like when you get an infection, I don't know, in your finger or something, and the pressure's building under your fingernail, and all you want is that pressure to be released. And I feel like that's where we're at right now. We just need the pressure to be released. And I think usually at those points, what gets so painful is that we don't know which way to turn, and things just feel like they're getting worse and worse and worse. But if we can just rest within ourselves and trust that, not to just do nothing, but that not everything is horrible, and that we are destined for greatness as a planet, and that something very wonderful can come of this, but at least energetically and otherwise, if we could believe that that's possible, that we can all learn how to work together and respect each other's differences and beliefs and views without having to go into these big oppositions, like, oh, I can't talk to anyone that has a different belief. Me, myself, I love certain kind of stimulation and conversation. Maybe it's because of my tattooing, and I've had so many different people in my studio from all over the world over 40 years or so, that I'm bound to have people with different views and opinions. And because I spend sometimes days with a person, and sometimes visits over years, I get to know them very well. And I've learned, or I've had to learn in some cases, how to open my mind more and see different people in the way they are and the way they see things, even though I don't necessarily see it the same way. It enriches my life so much more. So without going too much more into that, I think that's kind of where this portal project is coming from. Now I'm going to just go into a little bit about why I chose this mythology to go in with it. So there's this world tree, Yggdrasil, and it is at the center of the cosmos. I'm going to read bits of this because I don't have it fully memorized. It contains all of the worlds in its branches, in its roots. So there's 9 worlds that they more or less come. There's a few little variances from different backgrounds and stories, but that's generally it. The 9 worlds are the home to the various entities that are in these 9 worlds. Odin hung himself from this tree for 9 days. He drank from a pool of water, which is why it's so important to have this pool in here. It kind of seems a bit parallel to me with the whole Buddha thing in a lot of ways. But I think that's also an element of maybe that there's a bigger truth when there are parallel mythologies that so line up almost the same. Sometimes I think, well, maybe they copied each other, but maybe not so much. Maybe it's just a resonance that manifests through different people's minds as a mythology that tends to be so similar. I have a book called The Patterns That Connect that I got, maybe 30 years ago, and it's an abbreviated form of a whole multi-volume set that I'm pretty sure is in Robart's library, if I remember correctly. It was a great book and had a profound influence on me because the author that I don't remember, he went through, now as I mentioned, it's an academic book or set of volumes. He went through little symbols, cave drawing type symbols from and others from all over the world in all different time periods. And the point of the book that he brought up was, and he articulated all these different things, was that the different symbols and patterns that were almost the same from one culture to one time period, and in a lot of cases there's no way they could have crossed paths and influenced each other. Some cases once in a while maybe, but yet not only did they look almost identical, but they also had almost identical meaning and symbolism. How do you explain this? To me, that means that there is this core essence that every culture is kind of tuning in with and explaining within themselves and their own separate experiences, but there's something that's coming through. Some people call it an Akashic Records, or a field of all potentialities is one that's mentioned in some cultures and time periods too. I love that one. So yeah, whenever I see different stories crisscross and layer over each other, I feel like, okay, that's a message there, or events keep repeating. I feel like that's a message coming through from the universe for me. That's from my experience how I feel. And it's also an aspect with the doors. I mentioned a little bit earlier how when a lot of coincidences and synchronicities keep happening, there's a point where you kind of have to say, is that the universe kind of, or at least, like, and I say the universe, however you want to understand that, if that's a message within myself, a knowing, or a needing to do that, or to be a part of that, or to recognize the truth in that, whatever it is, it's a message. And while doing these doors, it kept on happening. It's insane, the little things that would happen while I'm doing that. I might mention one or two as I'm going, but I don't want to just kind of go too much into that. It'll come out in this and other stories. So yeah, so Odin hung himself from this tree for 9 days. I'm sure got lots of visions, lots of truths. He drank from the pool of water at the roots of the tree to gain wisdom. Says the gods convene daily to hold court at this tree as well. Now, of course, with gods, it's not like little walking beings and stuff. It's a whole other level of energetic frequency that they embody and contain. It's called the Well of Urd, U-R-D. I don't know exactly if that's the right pronunciation. Or the Well of Destiny is another interpretation of it. It's a holy place where 3 divine seers carve into the tree the destinies of all children. And seeing we all have been children once, unless we're a clone. Never thought of that. But unless, well, who knows? Unless we were all children once, which I think we all have been. Therefore, we have all, this is kind of where our destinies come from, or where we can find out information as well, seeing Odin got his wisdom from it. The serpent, I don't know how to pronounce this at the moment. I'm going to have to look them all up and get those little pronunciation things, but Needhog, Nidhogg, dwells beneath the tree where it continually gnaws on a root, that was a chicken, until the day of Ragnarok. Now, the little bit I know about Ragnarok, and I don't know a lot, it's sort of this horrible world destruction thing that's eminently possibly could happen some point, and that's going to unfold in this as well. It also mentions that the world tree, during that day of Ragnarok, of this full destruction, and it mentions it's kind of, this is this weird shit, like right now with all the fires, and it mentions the fires, like kind of interesting and bizarre. But it says that the world tree will shudder and shake and groan during Ragnarok. So that was just something. Each of the 9 worlds have different energies and meanings and places. The one interesting thing I found, I'm going to hop around here a bit, Valhalla, and many of you have heard about this. According with the Vikings, they all believed that if you died bravely in battle, you went to Valhalla. And Valhalla, I'll go into that later, but it's in a certain place on this world tree, kind of a heaven type of thing. It's above on the tree, that which represents where we're at, kind of around here, and then Valhalla is kind of about up here. And so anyone who dies bravely in battle goes here, and then here they spend their time sort of practice battling, I guess, but they can't die. So if they kill each other, they just heal right away. So they get to really, really practice. And the idea is that they're practicing for this certain day, if it happens, when it happens. And I'll give my interpretation of this in a minute. Doesn't mean it's right, it's just what I got from it. So waiting for that day, and when those gates of Valhalla are opened, or if they're opened, all these souls collected throughout history, and I'm sure it wasn't, if you would take this as in the meaning behind it, it would not just be limited to the Vikings at battle. It would be anyone who has died bravely in whatever battle it is, their battle, a battle with cancer, a battle with breathing with the knee of a cop on your neck, like everything that's been happening. I believe, and it's helping me in a lot of ways, seeing it this way, that it puts a bit more meaning into that which seems only tragic and meaningless. And I like to believe that a lot of the people that we've, I'm not going to list names right now because there's just too many of them, a lot of the people who have died tragically, I'd like to believe that if, and I know a lot of them have, let's say when they have died, even if the news gives a bad spin on it and everyone's in uproar, that's my wife grinding coffee. If everyone's in uproar, it's hard to see, but I am choosing now to believe that these people, like they said, if you die bravely in battle, which I would kind of equate that to the same thing, they go to this realm of a high esteem, and they're not just there to just, like it says, practice battling and stuff, but I think that's a metaphor, once again, that shows on some level they're doing work that's really important for the whole of what's happening right now. So I like to believe that on some energetic level, there are souls who have been on this planet way back or more recently and have died in a way where they have done the best and their life has not just been a waste. And I like to believe those souls in a way have almost been, they've kind of either on a soul level they've chosen themselves or been chosen, but they're not, it's not gone, it's not wasted, it's they're in preparation for something. And when that time of need comes, I like to believe that all these souls, and they say the gates of Valhalla open, and these souls come to basically help. And it's a nice feeling to think that that we might, although it seems like we're in such a traumatic period of time, and it is on a surface level, but what about other levels? Are there other levels within this existence that we're not fully aware of? Possibly. And I take this very seriously, so things are not always what they seem, and that there is something really potentially good happening, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen if we just sit back and do nothing either. So it's this kind of weird paradox. And this is what I'm feeling right now, is that we are possibly on the brink of this happening, where we could enter into a new level of